Imagine waking up and realizing the food is gone. Not for a day, not for a week, for months. The hunt has failed again. The berries have withered. The herds you followed have vanished over the horizon, and the rivers have gone quiet. Your stomach stopped growling a long time ago. Now it just aches, a dull, hollow pain that never leaves. Your children are thinner than they were a month ago, and every single morning you wake up to the same impossible question. The question that has haunted humans since the very beginning. Where does the next meal come from when there is no next meal? Because here's the truth we've almost completely forgotten. For nearly all of human history, starvation wasn't a rare disaster. It was a regular visitor. Famine came for our ancestors again and again, after failed hunts, after droughts, after brutal winters and endless rains. And what they did to survive those long, empty months is one of the most desperate, ingenious, and disturbing stories in all of human history. It shaped their bodies, it shaped their minds, and, unbelievably, it's still shaping you today, every time you feel hungry. Let's start with the most incredible survival machine of all, the one you're sitting inside right now, your own body. Long before ancient humans could do anything clever, their bodies had already prepared for famine, because famine had been part of the human story for millions of years. When the food runs out, your body doesn't just give up. It switches into a kind of emergency mode. First, it burns through its stored fat, which is exactly why we evolved to store fat so easily in the first place. Those reserves were a built-in pantry for the hungry months. Then, as the fat runs low, the body slows itself down. Your heart rate drops, your temperature falls, your energy fades, and you feel that heavy, sluggish exhaustion. Not because your body is failing, but because it's desperately trying to burn as little fuel as possible, to stretch every last scrap of energy across the emptiness. Ancient humans didn't understand any of this, but they lived it. Their own flesh was the first thing they ate during a famine, slowly, from the inside out. But the body can only stretch so far. So when the hunger deepened, ancient humans turned to something remarkable. They started eating things that we would never, ever call food. When the good food is gone, the definition of food changes completely. Across the world, starving people ate tree bark, stripping it and boiling the soft inner layer for hours until it became something they could swallow. They ate grass, leaves, and weeds. They dug up roots and bulbs, some of them bitter or barely edible, and cooked them for a long time to make them safe. They chewed on old leather, the very hides meant to keep them warm. In the most desperate moments, some even ate clay and dirt, packing their aching stomachs with earth just to feel full and to pull a few minerals from the soil. These are called famine foods, and nearly every culture on earth had them, a secret menu of last resorts, passed down through generations for the day the real food disappeared. And they didn't stop at plants. When you're starving, protein becomes precious beyond measure, and ancient humans learned to find it in places we now find revolting. They ate insects by the handful, grasshoppers, crickets, beetles, grubs, which are actually packed with protein and fat. They hunted anything that moved: rats, mice, lizards, snails, birds, snakes. In a famine, there were no disgusting animals. There was only food and not food. And when even the vermin ran out, they turned to the animals closest to them, the ones they had raised, the ones that shared their fire, their own livestock, and sometimes even their dogs. Because in the end, love comes second to survival, and a starving family will make the hardest choices imaginable to see the sun rise one more time. This is where the story turns truly dark, because sometimes even all of that wasn't enough. The insects ran out, the bark ran out, the last animal was eaten, and the famine kept going. In these unimaginable moments, the archaeological and historical record tells us something we can barely stand to hear. Sometimes, ancient humans ate their own dead. Survival cannibalism during famine appears throughout human history, in nearly every part of the world, whenever starvation pushed people past the final edge. It happened during ancient droughts. It happened during long sieges when a city was cut off from all food. It happened to travelers trapped by winter with no way out. This wasn't cruelty, and it wasn't evil. It was the last, horrifying arithmetic of a starving group choosing to let some live rather than let everyone die. We flinch from it, as we should, but it is part of who we are, a shadow at the very bottom of the human survival instinct, and it reveals just how far the will to live can push a person when there is nothing left. And that will to live led to some agonizing decisions long before it ever came to that. In a long famine, a group faced a brutal, silent math problem. There is not enough food for everyone, so who eats? Different cultures answered this terrible question in different ways. Some fed their children first, protecting the future of the group at all costs. Others, in the harshest tellings, fed their strongest hunters first. Because if the hunters starved and grew too weak to hunt, then everyone was doomed. The old, the sick, and the weakest sometimes ate last, or not at all. In the most extreme famines, some groups were forced to leave the weakest behind entirely, a decision so painful it still echoes through the myths and stories of cultures around the world. Famine didn't just starve the body, it forced people to decide what a human life was worth when there wasn't enough life to go around. But it wasn't all darkness and desperation, because ancient humans were clever, and the smartest thing they ever did about famine was to see it coming. The groups that survived the best were the ones who prepared during the good times for the bad times they knew were coming. In seasons of plenty, they didn't just eat, they preserved. They dried meat and fish into jerky that could last for months. They smoked food over fires. They buried supplies in cold pits and used the frozen ground as a natural freezer. They stored nuts, grains, and seeds. They rendered fat and sealed food away. This obsession with saving food for later may be one of the most important survival behaviors our species ever developed. The famine was coming, it always came, and the difference between life and death was often whatever you had managed to hide away months before, when your belly was still full and the future felt far away. And here's a beautiful twist buried in this grim story. The long, hungry months of famine may have quietly pushed humanity toward its greatest invention of all, farming. For most of history, people chased food across the land. But the constant terror of starvation gave our ancestors a powerful reason to try something new, to stay in one place, to plant seeds, to store grain in great quantities, to build a wall of food between themselves and the next famine. Agriculture wasn't just about growing crops. It was, in many ways, a war against hunger itself, an attempt to finally break the cycle of feast and famine that had tormented humans for 1,000,000 years. We didn't invent farming because it was easy. We invented it because we were tired of starving. So step back and look at everything our ancestors did when the food ran out for months. Their own bodies burned their fat and slowed to a crawl to survive. They ate bark, grass, roots, clay, insects, and vermin, anything that could fill a stomach. They made agonizing choices about who would eat and who would not. In the darkest moments, they crossed lines we can barely imagine. They obsessively preserved food in the good times to survive the bad. And eventually, they invented farming to try to end the nightmare forever. Every one of these was an answer to the same ancient, gnawing question that shaped our entire species. How do we survive when there is nothing left to eat? And here's the part that should stay with you, the part that's sitting inside you right now. You are the descendant of the survivors. Every single one of your ancestors, going back millions of years, made it through the hungry times. The ones who didn't have children didn't become anyone's grandparents. And that means your body was built by famine. It's why you crave fat and sugar so intensely. Those cravings kept your ancestors alive when calories were precious and rare. It's why your body clings to every extra pound so stubbornly. It's still preparing for a starvation that, for you, will probably never come. It's why the smell of food is so powerful, why a full pantry feels so comforting, why so many cultures celebrate with enormous feasts. Deep in your biology, a part of you is still living in the famine, still bracing for the months when the food runs out. We live in an astonishing moment, perhaps the first time in human history when, for many of us, food is always there. A whole world of it, a few steps away, any hour of the day. But your body doesn't know that. It's still running on ancient software written during 1,000,000 years of hunger, still whispering the same primal instruction it whispered to that first starving human. Eat while you can, store what you can, because the empty months are always coming. So the next time you feel that pull toward one more bite, that comfort in a stocked kitchen, remember where it comes from. Maybe the real question isn't what ancient humans did when the food ran out. Maybe it's how much of that ancient hunger is still quietly running the show every time you sit down to eat.